What if the secret to living to 100 is not hidden in a laboratory vault or a rare medical intervention, but revealed each morning in the simplest decision: we make what we choose to eat? Again and again, when no one is watching and nothing dramatic seems to happen. This content is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Individual nutritional needs, medical conditions, and health outcomes vary. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making changes to diet, lifestyle, or health practices. From the perspective of prize-winning medical science. Longevity begins not with abundance, but with restraint. A concept that often feels counterintuitive in a world that equates health with addition rather than subtraction. Cells are not impressed by how much we consume. They respond to how intelligently energy is delivered. When food arrives in overwhelming concentrations of sugar, refined starch, or industrial fat, the body interprets it as a metabolic emergency. Hormonal systems surge, inflammatory pathways activate, and the cell shifts its priorities away from long-term maintenance toward immediate survival. Over years, this repeated state of urgency becomes expensive, quietly accelerating biological aging whole. Minimally altered foods behave differently inside the body because they respect its evolutionary expectations. Vegetables, legumes, intact. Grains and naturally occurring proteins release energy slowly. It's buffered by fiber and complex structures that digestion must patiently unravel. This gradual delivery keeps blood glucose within narrow ranges, reducing the repeated insulin spikes that damage blood vessels and exhaust pancreatic function. At the cellular level, this stability protects mitochondria, the energy-producing structures that determine how efficiently a cell can repair itself. When mitochondria operate under low stress, fewer harmful byproducts are produced, and cellular aging decelerates. Nobel-level discoveries in metabolism have repeatedly pointed toward the same principle. Longevity thrives when cells are spared from constant overnutrition. Excess calories force cells into growth mode, prioritizing expansion over repair. In contrast, moderate intake encourages maintenance pathways that preserve cellular integrity. DNA repair enzymes function more efficiently, protein quality control systems remain active, and damaged components are replaced before they accumulate. Aging, then, is not simply the passage of time, but the gradual loss of precision within these systems. When they are chronically overworked, there is also a deeper signaling effect embedded in restrained, consistent eating. Hormones such as insulin, leptin, and growth factors are not merely metabolic regulators. They act as messengers that inform the body whether resources are stable or volatile. When meals are simple and predictable, these signals remain calm and coherent. The brain, sensing reliability, reduces stress output. Cortisol levels decline, sleep architecture improves, and tissues gain uninterrupted windows for regeneration. Over decades, this hormonal calm compounds into structural resilience. Perhaps most importantly, restrained nourishment teaches the body patience. Cells learn to operate efficiently rather than greedily. Energy is allocated with foresight instead of urgency. In this environment, inflammation loses its dominance and repair regains authority. The body becomes less reactive and more anticipatory, less focused on immediate defense and more invested in long-term preservation. Longevity emerges not as a dramatic extension of life, but as the quiet slowing of internal erosion, achieved through daily respect for the body's limits and its remarkable capacity for self-maintenance. At the microscopic level, the body is governed by cycles of renewal that operate quietly beneath conscious awareness, yet determine the pace at which aging unfolds. One of the most influential insights to emerge from prize-winning cellular research is that the body is not designed for constant intake. Instead, it evolved to function within natural pauses, intervals where nutrients are scarce and internal. Repair takes priority. During these periods, the cell shifts from growth and storage toward inspection and cleanup, a transition that is essential for long-term resilience. This internal renewal process is known as autophagy, a term that describes the cell's ability to identify damaged components, break them down, and reuse their raw materials. Far from being a sign of deprivation, this process is a hallmark of cellular intelligence. When food intake is continuous and excessive, autophagy is suppressed because the cell remains locked in growth mode. Damaged proteins accumulate, malfunctioning. Mitochondria persist, and structural errors compound quietly over time. Aging accelerates not because repair systems disappear, but because they are never given permission to fully engage. Daily dietary simplicity plays a critical role in allowing this repair rhythm to unfold. Meals built from whole foods, consumed without constant grazing, create metabolic clarity. Blood sugar rises and falls predictably. Insulin signals resolve cleanly. The body experiences defined periods of low nutrient availability. In these windows, repair pathways activate. Cells begin to recycle inefficient components, reduce oxidative load, and restore functional balance. This is not a dramatic event, but a steady housekeeping process that preserves internal order. Nobel recognized. Discoveries in molecular signaling have shown that certain plant-based compounds further support these renewal mechanisms. Natural polyphenols found in vegetables, legumes, and fruits act as mild biological stressors that strengthen cellular defenses rather than overwhelm them. They stimulate antioxidant systems, enhance DNA repair, and improve communication between cells. Unlike pharmaceutical interventions, these compounds work in harmony with the body's existing architecture, reinforcing pathways that evolution has already refined. Equally important is the psychological dimension of metabolic rhythm. Predictable eating patterns reduce uncertainty, and uncertainty is a potent driver of stress. When the brain perceives regularity, stress hormones recede, sleep deepens, and circadian clocks synchronize. These systemic changes feed back into cellular repair, as many restorative processes are tightly linked to sleep and hormonal timing. Longevity, in this sense, is not simply the outcome of what is eaten, but of when and how consistently nourishment arrives over years and decades. The cumulative effect of honoring these renewal cycles becomes visible in preserved organ function, stable energy levels, and delayed onset of degenerative disease. The body does not resist aging through force, but through discipline and rhythm. By allowing space between nourishment, by choosing foods that support rather than interrupt repair, the organism maintains coherence. Life extends not because time slows, but because internal damage no longer outpaces the body's capacity to restore itself. There exists within each of us an unseen ecosystem, vast in scale and influence, composed of trillions of microorganisms that live in constant dialogue with our physiology. This inner world, known as the microbiome, is not a passive passenger, but an active architect of health, shaping digestion, immunity, metabolism, and even emotional regulation. Nobel recognized research into immune signaling and cellular communication has revealed that the state of this microbial community plays a decisive role in determining how gracefully we age. When nourished properly, these microorganisms become guardians of balance, but when neglected or disrupted, they quietly accelerate decline. Daily intake of fiber-rich plants and naturally fermented foods provides the raw material this ecosystem needs to thrive. Fibers that escape digestion in the upper gut become nourishment for beneficial bacteria in the colon, where they are transformed into short-chain fatty acids that regulate inflammation, strengthen the intestinal barrier, and support metabolic stability. This process is subtle, yet its effects ripple throughout the body. A well-fed microbiome fortifies the gut lining, preventing toxins and inflammatory molecules from leaking into circulation, a phenomenon now recognized as a major contributor to chronic disease and premature aging. The immune system is intimately tied to this microbial environment. Nearly 70% of immune cells reside within the gut, constantly sampling microbial signals to determine what constitutes danger and what represents normality. When microbial diversity is high and nourishment is consistent, immune responses become discerning rather than reactive. Instead of remaining in a state of low-grade inflammation, the immune system learns restraint, deploying its defenses precisely and efficiently. This calm vigilance reduces the slow, cumulative tissue damage that underlies cardiovascular disease, neurodegeneration, metabolic disorders, many cancers. Fermented foods introduce living microorganisms that further enrich this internal ecosystem. These organisms do not merely populate the gut temporarily. They communicate with resident bacteria, enhancing metabolic cooperation and competitive balance. Through this interaction, the microbiome becomes more resilient, capable of recovering quickly from stressors such as illness, antibiotics, or dietary disruption. Resilience at the microbial level translates directly into resilience at the systemic level, preserving metabolic stability and immune equilibrium across decades. There is also a profound neurological dimension to this relationship. Microbial metabolites influence neurotransmitter production, stress hormone regulation, and inflammatory signaling within the brain. A nourished microbiome supports emotional regulation, cognitive clarity, and psychological steadiness. Over time, this reduces chronic stress exposure, which is itself one of the most potent accelerators of aging. Mental well-being and physical longevity, once considered separate domains, now appear deeply interwoven through this microbial bridge. What emerges from this scientific understanding is a reframing of longevity itself, rather than viewing aging as an isolated cellular process. It becomes a collective outcome of countless interactions between human cells and microbial partners. Daily nourishment that respects this partnership fosters cooperation rather than conflict. The body becomes an environment of stability rather than defense, of harmony rather than resistance. In such an internal landscape, inflammation subsides, immune intelligence sharpens, and biological aging slows, not through force, but through the quiet power of symbiosis. Healthy fats occupy a unique and often misunderstood position in the biology of aging. For decades, they were framed as optional or even dangerous. Yet prize-winning advances in neuroscience and cardiovascular science have clarified their essential role as structural and signaling molecules. Every cell membrane in the body is built from lipids, and the quality of these fats determines how flexible, responsive, and resilient those membranes remain over time. When daily intake is dominated by damaged or industrially altered oils, membranes become rigid and vulnerable. Nourishment comes from natural, stable sources. Cellular architecture retains its integrity across decades. The brain, more than any other organ, reveals this dependency, is composed largely of fat and neuronal. Membranes rely on specific lipid profiles to transmit electrical and chemical signals with precision. Consistent intake of fats from sources such as olive oil, nuts, seeds, and omega-rich fish supports synaptic fluidity, allowing neurons to adapt, form new connections, and repair existing ones. Cognitive decline does not begin with memory loss. It begins with microscopic failures in communication. When membranes lose flexibility, signaling slows, inflammation rises, and the brain becomes metabolically fragile. Cardiovascular health follows a similar logic. Blood vessels are living tissues, not inert pipes. Their ability to expand, contract, and respond to changing demands depends on membrane composition and inflammatory tone. Healthy fats reduce oxidative stress within vessel walls and improve endothelial function, allowing blood flow to remain smooth and adaptive. Over years, this translates into preserved circulation, stable blood pressure, and reduced strain on the heart. Longevity in this context is not about preventing a single event, but about maintaining elasticity in systems designed to move and respond. These fats also influence gene expression in subtle but meaningful ways. Certain lipid-derived molecules act as messengers that regulate inflammation, insulin sensitivity, and cellular repair pathways. When consumed consistently, rather than sporadically, they create a biochemical environment that favors long-term maintenance over short-term stimulation. This consistency matters because the body responds less to isolated choices than to patterns. A stable intake of protective fats teaches the system what to expect. allowing regulatory mechanisms to fine-tune themselves with efficiency. There is also an energy dimension that is often overlooked. Fats provide a steady, slow-burning fuel that stabilizes blood sugar and reduces metabolic volatility. This steadiness protects the brain from energy fluctuations that impair focus and accelerate neuronal stress. Over decades, this translates into preserved mental endurance rather than sporadic sharpness followed by decline. The mind remains capable of sustained attention, reflection, and learning, qualities that define not just long life, but meaningful life. When viewed through this lens, healthy fats are not indulgences, but foundational materials. They do not promise immortality, but they reduce friction within the systems that most often fail with age. By preserving membrane integrity, calming inflammation, and supporting neural and vascular function, they allow the body to age with coherence rather than fragmentation. Longevity unfolds not through dramatic intervention, but through daily reinforcement of the structures that quietly sustain us. Perhaps the most underestimated force in human longevity is not a nutrient, a molecule, or a medical intervention, but the psychological signal created by repetition. The body is exquisitely sensitive to patterns, and patterns convey meaning. When daily nourishment arrives in a predictable, uncomplicated form, the nervous system interprets this consistency as safety. Safety, at a biological level, is not an emotion, but a physiological state in which stress responses recede and long-term maintenance becomes possible. In contrast, dietary chaos communicates uncertainty, and uncertainty keeps the body in a state of vigilance that accelerates when meals are simple and regular, stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline gradually lose dominance. Hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which governs the stress response, begins to quiet. This shift has profound downstream effects. Lower cortisol allows immune cells to function with precision rather than aggression, reduces fat accumulation, driven by stress signaling, and protects memory centers in the brain that are highly sensitive to hormonal excess. Over time, this hormonal calm translates into reduced systemic inflammation, one of the central drivers of aging and degenerative disease. Predictable eating rhythms also synchronize circadian biology. The body operates on internal clocks that regulate hormone release, digestion, temperature, and cellular repair. When nourishment arrives at irregular times, these clocks drift out of alignment, disrupting sleep and impairing metabolic efficiency. Consistent daily patterns restore coherence. Digestive enzymes are released on time, insulin sensitivity improves, and nighttime repair processes proceed without interruption. Sleep deepens not because of conscious effort, but because the body recognizes stability in its environment. This sense of stability extends into appetite regulation. When the body trusts that nourishment will arrive reliably, hunger signals become accurate rather than urgent. Cravings driven by stress or deprivation diminish, replaced by a quieter awareness of true need. This reduces cycles of overeating and restriction that strain metabolic systems and erode self-regulation. Over decades, stable appetite signaling preserves insulin sensitivity and reduces the risk of metabolic disorders that shorten lifespan. There is also a subtle cognitive effect. Repetitive nourishing habits reduce decision fatigue. When food choices are no longer a daily negotiation, mental energy is freed for creativity, reflection, and social connection. These psychological resources are not trivial. They are associated with lower rates of depression, stronger immune function, and improved cardiovascular health. Longevity is not only a matter of biological survival, but of sustaining the mental conditions that support engagement with life. Ultimately, the science points to work to quiet truth. The body invests in the future when it senses reliability in the present. Consistent nourishment communicates that the environment is stable, that resources are sufficient, and that emergency measures are unnecessary. In response, repair genes express more reliably, tissues regenerate more efficiently, and aging slows at its foundation. Life extends not through force or novelty, but through the deep biological confidence created by simple habits repeated faithfully over time.